Hello. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to a platform conversation. Actually, two conversations taking place this afternoon here at Bergen Kunsthall. My name is Axel Wieder. I'm director of Bergen Kunsthall. And we opened yesterday a large-scale new exhibition here titled Earthworks with, I think, 35 participating artists, contributors working in various media. We took this opportunity of having an opening and having many artists participating in the exhibition to organize today a couple of conversations with some of the participating artists to share further insight into these works, to open up some threads of discussion and go into more detail about some of the works, to have this as a kind of discursive exchange taking place also after the exhibition, which is not just a good opportunity for visitors and people interested in the exhibition and its themes. It's also actually for us always a nice moment to debrief and have a kind of relaxed conversation after these intense days and weeks of exhibition install. So we appreciate the artists taking the time to discuss here with us, and we appreciate you all being here and sharing this moment with us. Earthworks, as the title implies, deals with questions around nature, around precarity of the environment, and artists' concerns with these over a couple of decades in various formats and various interests and takes on what nature actually is. This is part of the topic of the exhibition also, how we subject ourselves, or how we project ourselves as subjects in discussing about nature. And we'll go into this in these conversations. I'm happy to hand over to my colleague Silja Leifsdottir, who's curator of the exhibition with me, together with me. And the first panel will be moderated by her with two of the participating artists. And I hand over the microphone to introduce the speakers and the theme of the conversation. Technical remarks. Before doing that, I should say that the conversation is live streamed. As many of the platform talks that we host here, there's two cameras here in the back of the room. Please be aware that you are filmed if you sit in the angle of one of these cameras. We have organized two panels, as I said, each of them taking place for around 30 minutes. We will have the possibility to have questions after each panel for a brief time. And then at 3:30 we continue, not here, but downstairs with a conversation with the magazine OEI, downstairs in gallery 1B. We have a toilet which is here, which is accessible. Please feel free to use. Otherwise, when we have a Q&A, we also have a microphone for questions, which would be great to use, not just for the acoustics in the space, but also for the live stream. So, with these remarks, I'm happy to hand over and continue later on.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much, Axel. And hi, everyone. Really nice to see you. And for everyone from yesterday that was here for the opening, thank you so much. It's perfect with these bright lights when you have a bit of a hangover. It's wonderful. So I will start with introducing this artist in our sofa next to me. So we have Carola Grahn. Born in Jokkmokk, living today in Malmö, is a conceptual artist and employs a wide range of media, but as a core often creates something like scenes or encounters in gallery contexts and public spaces. Her works were including, among others, in Kunsthall Charlottenburg's One If by Land, Two If by Sea, organized by the artist collective New Red Order in 2022, where she showed an ice cream distribution installation. And in the current permanent display at Moderna Museet, where Grahn has made a large intervention in the form of a stacked wood horizon of meaning. And I also had the pleasure of visiting an extensive solo presentation, Trägränsen, at Vanos Konst i Skåne, that ended not that long ago. Works by Grahn are often marked by dark humor and a profound openness to emotional realities, and interweave references to popular culture and Sami traditions to challenge power structures and social constructions. And then also in the sofa we have Sissel Bergh, based in southwestern Sápmi in Trondheim and Fosen. And as an artist, she works with film, sculpture, installation, painting, drawing, and text, and investigates the ways in which we can connect with and understand the world around us. Sissel studied at the Academy of Fine Arts in Oslo and the Technical University of Durban in South Africa, and lived for several years in Zambia. Some recent of her projects deals with language and place names, and more specifically the history of names and places along the coast of southern Sápmi, their meaning and connections to landscapes and knowledge systems. Or, as she says in a description, I work with histories and landscapes which lie within South Sápmi language, with a very local knowledge of living within landscapes with its non-human natives. The title of her work shown here in the exhibition, Elmi, is also a Southern Sami word, meaning sky, air, and storm, opening traditional meanings towards a contemporary reflection on air, breathe, birds, mountains, and wind power. Bergh has also recently participated in the exhibition Speaking Back at Kunsthall Hamburg, the trio exhibition Kunna Gunna Gonka at Kunsthall Trondheim in 2023, the Sydney Biennale in 2020, and Gipka in Gothenburg in 2019. So this was a little bit of the background, and I will start with asking Sissel some questions. Yeah, Mike is there. So I mentioned the film that we're showing here, but maybe it's good for those who haven't seen the work. I mean, many of you here perhaps already had a peek downstairs in the exhibition, but maybe not the online audience did. The work is very layered, but an important point are the industrial wind farms at Fosen that have made it into a broader discussion thanks to the ongoing resistance from Sami activists and people affected. How would you describe the film, the work?
The work is maybe not the typical activist film, I would say. It's an investigation of the relation to land, to the sky, to birds and people and living creatures and it's about air, breath, the connections between everything. And it's also about the Fosen case. It's about the total change which has happened to our landscapes the last less than 10 years. The industrialization of the mountains in the middle of the bird tracking areas. It's about the connection with the language and land, and how language in the South Sami language, how it is connected to everything. So it's like a poetic take. That was like a short.
Maybe you can also, because it has a larger context, also in terms of being a series of a larger work that you're working on. So maybe can you say something about the first part and also how you will continue to work?
It's the second part of a series, which is called Know How Know, which is about how we relate to the world and how we are perceiving the world. It has this local context from Fruan to the border area. So I've been for many years trying to dig into all the context about the land. I was returning from Zambia and I needed to reconnect. So it was my way into coming back home. And it is the first film was called Chaatsie, which means water, and it's about the relation with the ocean, with everything surrounding the ocean, the inhabitants of the ocean, how we relate in many different ways. It's about the science, the acceleration. What is it called?
You can also say it in the Norwegian. Yeah.
Excavation. Yeah. Yeah. Extraction of every, turning everything into resources, and now the second film, Elmia, is it has how the wind is, it's a bit different than the first one, because I'm trying to sort of make it from the wind, more like the way things are connected, how it's breathing in and breathing out, and the wind is cleaning out, and it's part of everything. It's the image of the soul. It's and then the people who are deciding that you have to sacrifice areas of land and for the greater good. The idea that building wind power is going to transform and save the future. So all these mountains has turned without any human infrastructure from before. They have now turned into industrial areas, which has let down all the inhabitants of the land. And following the trials from the Fosenhjerke, the Oriel Fosenhjerke site, through the years before the High Court ruling, and because I don't, should I contextualize, or do you think people know? Because for a long time the mountain has been the reindeer herders of Fosenhjerke has been had to deal with all these plans of wind power in all the mountains, and they had to deal with it in that writing, hearing, I don't know these words in English, but høringssvar to absolutely all of these cases, and going into trial and being in the trials for years and years, and also the humiliation within the court, because the knowledges that people have about the reindeer herding and the importance of how the animals are behaving, and all these kind of knowledges are not taken into account. It's not regarded important, and also it is ridiculed because it doesn't make much money. But especially in the southern Sápmi area, the reindeer husbandry is the core of Sami survival, and also where the Sami language has survived through the times, and South Sami reindeer herders have been had to let go of so many areas for Norway and Sweden energy plans. So it's like you have this knowledge and power and what is important is also a part of this film. I think that it's about how we perceive the world, and also what is important. And I think it's not easy. It's not easy to talk from such different perspectives. It's like the value systems are so completely different.
Yeah, I think so. When I saw the film, I think also what I was struck with was that I felt like, because of the poetics, that it was focusing, for example, on, to take an example, like a lot of the sound that these windmill also makes. It made me sort of be more conscious about some of these. I mean, their size and all of these things is one thing, of course, but it also does something with the smell and the sound and all of these things that, thinking from a reindeer perspective, of course, has a lot to do. And when I saw the film, I sort of felt a bit like, for a moment, I was a bit of a reindeer, trying to sort of understand what these actually do to everything, the senses, in a way. So it kind of had a very different, using these different, the wind and the smell, and it just felt like I could understand it better. And I think also when I saw it the first time, you also mentioned there will be a third chapter, but you also mentioned that it was also like sorgarbeid, I think, is a beautiful Norwegian word. It's can't find the best English word, like it was sorrow or grief work, but it doesn't really work so well. But sorgarbeid is like, it is work to be in a process of dealing with grief and sorrow, the time and labor that it actually is, in a way. And I thought that was also really beautiful, that it felt also like a sorgarbeid, in a way. Does that?
Yeah, I mean, like the mountains in Fosen, it was, it's especially in Roan, but also in Åfjorden, this area, it's a total change within 10 years. And it has totally transformed the whole area and the way you perceive it, and it's like a broken land. And it, you know, even if you will when, you know, like in the Fosen, the Orgelfosenhjerke site, they have this plan that when the 20 years now with the deal with the state, that after these 20 years, they are supposed to be the one to say if it's going to continue or not. So if you are to take down those nearly 200-meter mills and return the area, it's such a, I mean, it will never be the same anymore. It is destroyed. It's like completely wounded body. It's and I think only people with no relationship with the land can accept that this can happen. I think for people who have this relationship, it is.
I just wanted to add to that, because I think an important thing, you said it, but it was it can be said more specifically. So the reindeer changes behavior around windmills, and as a reindeer herder who's been on this land for generations, they of course notice that, and that it's problematic not only because of so many reasons, but also because Norwegian and Swedish and Finnish state regulate where reindeer herders are allowed to have reindeers. So, like, you know, it's on a map. It's not like we can have reindeers anywhere, right? It's like, and they change the behavior. So it's also imagine also having both for a living both for the way you live, but also for your economy and your way of surviving. The land, when the windmills change the reindeer's path, it changes everything for your life and for your village and for your, let's say, business, if we want to go to that. Because as you said, also, the knowledge that reindeer herders have, they are in the forest
every day.
Every day. Like, of course, any person who lived like that would have a lot of knowledge, even if you started doing it like now and spent so many years. But in court, it doesn't count. There's like having that knowledge and saying like, look, the reindeers are changing path. And of course, okay, we can say that about reindeers, but we can also assume that other animals are also reacting to the windmills and changing behaviors.
Yeah. I think that if I've been up in one of these parks when it's been 15 meter per second wind, and it's like living in a avalanche or in volcanic activity or like a bombing or something. So even if I know that there are, it's this construction which makes the sound, my body reacts on a deeper level. So I get into panic, and I imagine animals with a different and more sensitive. How it must be experiencing that from their bodies.
Maybe I can make I wanted to say, since we were talking about sorgarbeid, Carola, I will then try to sort of also say, yesterday you did a reading of Dixvit 2013 to 2019. That was very powerful, I think, for everyone that was present, and that's also for me is this sorgarbeid, but of course not exactly on the same topic, but I think it was important for me also and for Axel to make some space for sorrow and grief also in this large exhibition, that this should also be part of it. And I'm very grateful for both of you that you managed in such a beautiful way to also create that space that I think that your works did. And then maybe I could continue with a question, follow-up question for you, Carola, then. Because the poetry reading from yesterday, but we also have a cluster, several other works by you in the exhibition. But I think today, also because of time, I wanted to maybe talk about Mother and Son, 5 years. And if you could a little bit first the same, to describe it a little bit for those who haven't seen it or will see it later, and then maybe talk a little bit about that.
Oh, thank you. Well, so Mother and Son, 5 years is a work that's like a little bit hard for me to describe shortly, because it's one of my most conceptual works, and I've kind of built a philosophy around stapling chopped wood or
stacking wood.
Stacking wood is probably how you say it. Stacking wood, and I think that it's also a work that is kind of hard as an audience to enter into, because there's a lot of things happening like before the exhibition is actually a central part for the work. And this is a long time commitment. So I had my first child 5 years ago. And before that, my mother had passed. But before that, also there had been a lot of suicides in Sápmi on the Swedish side. It had been finally some talk about like mental health amongst Sami people in Sweden after forever silence. So I started with that mental illness situation. I started to try to find like what's true Sami mythology, kind of being in the world, and I wanted to go to my own experience rather than like looking into books or sayings about our people. And I just realized that at least how I grew up, and I would say Jokkmokk and like that part of Sweden, it's not that talkative in culture. It's a quite hard-working people, even both Sami and non-Sami, I would say, and people also who like to be in the nature. Talking about feelings is like they might be a long way there for many. So, but I was like, okay, but we're good at working, and how can I find something connected to nature, but it's like easy, monotone, a monotone work that's not. I didn't want to have shop-to-shop wood, because that's like so much effort, and it's about strength. But something that everybody can do, that we can do, and maybe when we do it, we can talk. So that's like, I have many works with stacked wood, and over the years, I've put more and more rules of how to stack them. So, for example, the work you were mentioning that Moderna Museet in Sweden now has in its collection, they have rules about like what to talk about when the staff or anyone invited are stacking it, like before the exhibition even opens, like, and it's rules about who can be in the room and like all those things. And when I had my son, I just wanted to talk about motherhood. It's something that's so common, but still I find in many ways private, and also like surrounded with invisible rules, but at the same time it's fundamental, like giving life. I just found it to be like huge and fundamental, like giving life from your own body. That was like I couldn't believe like that we don't celebrate it in like a greater way in society in a way. So I'm like suggesting in that first so long story. I'll jump, but it's developed. So this work follows my son's age. That's why it's called 5 years, the one in the exhibition, because he's 5 years now. And it's not, so English is not so good because it's not son, it's actually son. And son in Sami culture is very a loaded symbol and means a lot of things. So, and sun, of course, light. It's a light, someone can be a light in someone's life, so it has a lot of meaning. But I tried to, so the rules here are, I haven't stacked the wood. It's another mother from Bergen who got a letter from me and instructions from the Bergen Kunsthall, from Silja, how to do this, an invitation to come here and to stack the wood for me and to read this letter. And so I write a personal letter to a person I've never met and talk about, I try to be as true as I can about the relation to my firstborn, and like where we're at now. But at the same time, because I do believe that the personal is political, so that I try to open up, of course, for bigger questions about life that hopefully other people can relate to. And I think if it's really tough, it's a lot of text, and it's tough standing like in the white cube reading. But for me, the work is not finished until like he's grown up, or even when I'm dying. Because also, if you see the stacks down there, they're dependent on our height. So the lowest stack is the height of my firstborn when he raises his hand as high as he can reach. That's the level for the smaller stack. And the bigger stack is when I hold my hand up as far as I can reach. And I imagine we would do like mother and son 17 years, and his stack will probably be
taller than you.
Mine. But it's a way of like thinking long term about relationships, and also that intimate. I mean, an intimate experience of living in the world that we're in, and I would really recommend you. So Carola Stampone has written a really, really beautiful answer to my letter. So I really recommend you to glance at it and maybe pick up pieces. But I would say that we talk about much, much more than just being a mother. Even like we talk about like the state of the world and in metaphors of the rainbow in this case.
Yeah, and I would say that it's also, since experience from an institutional perspective, the instructions that you mentioned also does something to the way of thinking from an institution. So to give an example, there's also instructions of that when you invite the other mother to come and do the stacking, the mother should be left alone in the gallery space, and the mother should also be offered babysitters for children if the mother does not want to include the children in the stacking, but it's also possible to include the children if the mother wants to. And then it also creates these, like, the effect of that is actually also these other pragmatic things that is like, okay, but if the mother is going to be alone at what time of day, then it has to be after everyone else is left. And then it's also a type of labor. So then you have discussions around, but we should pay for the stacking, and what's the labor, and what do we pay as an institution, or so it creates all of these. And if we have to get babysitters, how do we do this? And it is a really sort of, it also has a larger thing around it actually from the institutional perspective. That was also really interesting to see how we have to like care and omsorg for the work, creating this in the evening in the middle of an hectic installation period. We have to leave the mother alone to do that. And it was actually just really beautiful as well as a experience from the institutional perspectives. I would also recommend everyone to glance at these letters. And also you met for the first time then yesterday. You got to actually meet each other for a moment after the letter exchange, which is also sometimes, I guess, not possible, but here it was. So it was also really nice. Yeah,
and like a big part of it is also, so I've done it 2 times before, one time in Santa Fe in New Mexico, and one time in Helsinki, and I never met those mothers, and like that's also, but in the way I see it also in the end, or it will be a conversation between mothers all around the world. Like I think that I like that aspect of it, but I've used the wood stacking in like talking about very many different topics, but I like also that I do believe that our private lives should be more present also in our workspaces. I think, and for me that's very connected to Sami life of being that, like, but I have kids, like how can am I allowed to like say that I need to pick up my kids or stuff like that? So I'm really glad to hear that it had that effect.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so for time-wise reasons, I will now also ask if you have questions for each other, and then also if there are questions from the audience before we then move on to our next panel. And if you do have questions also, then there's a mic. Yeah.
I mean, I feel I could ask you, but I think we should first give it to the audience. We're so little time.
And if no one, then yeah.
But I hope, like, I feel also when we're talking about those Sami issues, and sometimes I feel that it can be hard for people outside of the Sami society to even pose question or show that you don't know or don't understand or are critical. That almost never happens because like there's a big gap of knowledge also there. But I wish to reach not only a Sami audience, like I wish to reach deeper, and I think your work as well, like air and wind and breathing, it's human, like, or like even more than human, but like, so don't feel intimidated by talking about something completely different. I think
It's done. Yeah. Thank you very much, both of you. I have a question for Sissel. A beautiful film you're showing, and you were talking about this being activist or not being activist, and obviously with the Fosen case, you know, it's a very concrete case about land, about, you know, wind. But there's one passage in the film that I think was very, very moving, and that was when I think the shaman was talking about the wind being free, and then these windmills are making that wind captive, and the wind becoming a slave. I'm not sure if this is going to be formed to a question, but there's with a case like this, or with activism in many ways, is very often very concrete. This is what's happening. The mountain is going to be destroyed, and etc., etc. But here we are talking about other elements as well. And with there's a, I don't know how to form it, but it's a worldview or a view of the nature or being surrounded, being part of, that is coming across really strongly in this movie. That is, at least to me, or someone from outside a Sami culture, becomes you know, a fresh way of seeing what we are part of. And I was just wondering if you can, in any way, say a little bit more about it.
It's the words of Heike Kopfjell, and he, you know, the way things have been done is it's without making any precautions of what the wind is. You know, it is this force which is the life-giving force. At the same time, it is also destruction. And without working with the wind, we end up creating these murderous, monstrous monsters, which is the opposite of life. And I think, yeah, I want the film to talk about, you know, what is life in this. I wished you had seen the film so that we.
It was a cue. That's my reason for not having seen it. I had to line up for it.
Yeah. So I mean, it's the wind and the breath is also, you know, life, and you can turn everything into its opposite, and I think that's what this industrious what has happened or is happening is doing. It's destroying life.
Yeah, so it's colonizing on several levels, and here you actually keep life captive.
But I feel we were talking a little bit before this in the cafe also, that it almost feels like so that we don't have a say anymore, and it's not, again, just us Sami people, but ordinary people don't have a say. That like, I like this forest, like I like walking here, I like being here, like that's like a non-value today. That's like nothing. Like it's only the money and the survival of like an unsustainable lifestyle. Western society in Scandinavia has become like slaves under money, and like there's like, you can't argue with money anymore. It's like we're so, as society, so rich, and we need to be we can't like almost imagine like living differently, and just suggesting that we should save a forest because we like it and because animals still live there. That's like, almost cuckoo. It seems like, I feel.
And also that life is so, I mean, nature is so concrete. It's just, you know, it's stone, tree, and insects. And there's no sense of the spirits of, you know, it's, you cannot even talk about it because it's like, it's, that there's so much more to land and you know around us, and it's so connected to our souls and our forefathers, mothers, and you know history, and it's in our hearts, and when you destroy something which also is on your inside, you destroy it within the people, and it's and I think this is for everyone who has a relationship to land, and it's we are destroying also our insides by doing this to the other forces.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you both for amazing works and a lovely conversation. Thank you. I wanted to, I had one kind of question comment to you, Carola, because you talked about the audience, and I think it was, you mentioned that maybe it's hard to enter the work when you see it, but well, now you've given us a lovely introduction, so it's not so hard anymore. But I think that it also depends on if you consider the audience also being the one mother at the time that you are actually like inviting in as a collaboration. So, I mean, that's also just maybe a question or a comment if that's maybe your audience is the.
No, I see her like a partner in a way. Like, I like the also idea of having like intimate conversations with people I don't know and who doesn't know me. So, but I think also it's a way of like this, like living the art, like making it count. And those conversations, they count to me. And that's why I'm hoping it will touch an audience later. But in a way, I'm pretty not thinking about that this work will kind of never be finished. So it's finished here for me now. Like I wanted to add, like when I read Carol's letter, I was like immediate. I had so many thoughts and I wanted to write back to her. But then I felt like, actually, it's you, like it's the audience who hasn't been a part of conversation who should also have those, your own thoughts about, like, answer her, like to keep the conversation going, because she really touches upon, like, so many things that is, I think, that we all can relate to in one way or another. So I'm hoping, like, that's kind of like, that we, as for hopefully all those conversations, like we start something and then you continue. Like that's the way I see that work functioning.
But, yeah, and I was also curious to hear more about the other works you are presenting. The sculpture.
I think we can't. I think it feels like time's running up.
Thank you.
But thank you.
There's one more question in the back, maybe. Time for that before.
Yeah, it'll be quick. It's picking up on what you were just talking about, because the letter that she writes to you is really beautiful. I also love the way it's installed, because you get a sort of intimacy with the two letters behind the wood stack. And I was just wondering how you selected her, because it's a sort of brilliant artistic or curatorial discovery. So I just wondered the thoughts behind this. How did you find this incredible writer, mother, person?
Like technically how it works is that I ask the curator, like, you know, anyone who's like, who could be interested in like this kind of work, and like who's like just an interesting woman. And then you suggested her. And this is like a person who she is a philosopher, she lives here, she seems to have a lot to say. So I would say that's why also, compared to earlier letters that I have, this is longer, and she actually said she had 17 pages, but and she had to reduce it to 2, which she didn't succeed with. So it was like more than 2, and we had to and then in the end it was 3. And but I think it says something about her. She's a lovely person, she Google her. Her name is on the label, and there I think. She's also into this subject, so it was a lucky, in a way, coincidence. It's not a coincidence. It's the work of the contact net that you also have, I guess, built in this city. But it's also like every letter is different, and it sparks different thoughts.
Okay, I think that was what we had time for. Thank you so much. We'll do a quick turnover, I guess, right? But we should say thank you for this lovely conversation.
Okay, then we continue straight away with part 2 of our conversations, and I have the pleasure to welcome 3 guests next to me. Sophia and Portra to the right, and in the middle Inghild Karlsen and Rasmus Thor Christensen. And we label these talks artist talks, but in this case it's a bit more complicated, as we will see in my introductions, because yeah, one artist, 2 contributors. Actually, also an artist, but yeah, we'll see. But thematically, it was really great to have the first conversation and focus so closely on really current political issues and really harsh realities and impact of points in the way in which humans or capitalism, you could say, interacts with the environment, and to have that really straight there on the table, and which is also like one of the triggers of the exhibition that we organized here. In this panel now, we'll take a step back from that, not necessarily in its urgency or in its directness in dealing with environmental issues or how we relate to the world and the impact that we leave there, but maybe historically a bit. So 2 of the artists that we will talk about don't live anymore, which is maybe speaking about the way that it's a slightly different generational approach, and this will be maybe also interesting to discuss, actually. Again, I'm generalizing. Inghild is working today, but the work we're showing is has been initially made in a different time. So I start with Inghild in a quick introduction. Inghild Karlsen is born in Tromsø and lives and works in Oslo today. She's certainly one of the large figures of her generation in Norway, with an ongoing presence and contribution to the artistic discussion over many decades. Her practice is hard to categorize. Working initially with materials such as felted wool and silk, she expanded her practice significantly towards different media, but also different practices. She worked as a scenographer for important national productions and is a former director of Kunstnernes Hus in Oslo. There were currently 2 large works by her on view in collection displays in Oslo. Jordballon from 1988 at Nationalmuseet. It's still there, and it's really an amazing piece. Everybody who's in Oslo should have a look at it. And 2 works were shown at the kind of permanent collection display at Hene Onsdag, a caravan sculpture and a series of felt creatures. Inghild showed twice already at Bergen Kunsthall in its former iteration as Bergens Kunstvereinigung, once in 1988 with the show Namadis, when Jordballon was shown for the first time, and as we will see, also the work that we show currently here was shown in an earlier version in this exhibition, and then again in 1999 as festival exhibition artist. And then I want to mention one book that you published, which I really found remarkable. When we visited you, you gave us copies, and it was again like another surprising aspect of your really meandering and extensive practice. The book Christian's Hus, about a Sea Sami person from Kvalsund in Finnmark, who built a house that you discovered, and you kind of entered the history of the person, but also maybe a kind of way of relating to the world through this house, and as a kind of remnants of a person and their practice. Then I'm moving to Danish artist Annette Holdensen, who lived 1934 till 2023, so passed away last year, who created art out of the often overlooked. She was a seminal figure in Danish textile art history, trained as a weaver and instrumental in introducing the use of fabrics into contemporary art at the end of the 1960s. Her work explored material experimentation that, seen from a contemporary perspective, operates within an eco-feminist framework and includes, besides physical artistic objects, also the creative work within a scene and generating hospitality and self-organization as principles of exchange and solidarity. From the 1980s, her weaving practice evolved to include 3-dimensional sculpture, grounded in her interest for recycled materials and historic craftsmanship. And we have some of these examples of these works here downstairs in the exhibition. And her work was recently shown at Overgarden in Copenhagen in 2022, where she also was one of the first ever shown artists in 1987, and at Christian Andersen Gallery in 2023, and she's working on she's included in a forthcoming project with a Laboratory for Aesthetics and Ecology as part of their larger project, Hosting Lands. And we have here Sophia Luna Portra, artist and musician, and one of the granddaughter of Annette Holdensen, and who's working with the estate, is taking care of some of the work, and is also in this way continuing the legacy of the work. And then, third artist represented here, Marius Heyerdahl, 1938 to 1979, who was a pioneer of Norwegian installation art, also described as Norway's first beat artist. And his work was frequently met with public outrage, quite a public reception actually, but often challenging and negative. When he left an enduring legacy, most significantly through the long-term project, The Last Orc, which we have presented here downstairs in the exhibition. The project started in 1971 and resulted from deep concern for the North Sea pollution and its effects on landscape and people. And together with a group of collaborators, Heyerdahl embarked on a protest action travel on a large-scale movable soiled bird built around a caravan, a kind of movable truck, an attraction pointing to this topic, with a bird's head crafted by artist Kari Rolfsen. And some of Heyerdahl's work is lost due to his own will, famously sunk in a fjord close to Kristiansand. And many of the works are also lost or not documented because of their nature as early examples of performance and activist work within the art context. And yeah, we had big support by Rasmus Thor Christensen in putting together the display downstairs, who's an art historian and a curator currently working for Posten Moderne in Trondheim. And he wrote an MA thesis on Heyerdahl's performative practice, The Birds Are Coming Home to Roost. Yeah, Heyerdahl's performative practice, 1964 to 76. And yeah, also really groundbreaking research work on Heyerdahl in this context. I wanted to start with a few questions on Inghild, for Inghild. Again, like, so we said the work that you have downstairs, the ballon, was made initially in the first version for the exhibition here in 1988. Can you give a bit of context of how it was presented initially?
Yeah, thank you for letting me have a new one, because it was only shown once, and that was in '88 here. And it was a big project in Bergen. I had my art education also from Bergen, so Bergen is very close to me. And it was a performance in a German up in the hill, Kumba, or vad heter ruin. And we were working here. I had a base group on 4 people to make all the felt. It was a lot of felt in this production also. And it was based on the main things. So it was one exhibition in the whole here. And it was also, you can say, for the theater and for the performance with our process with all this. Wool is made from water, soap, and you have to dance on it for hours, finish it in one piece, mostly. And this balloon was the idea of to go through the simple visual things, that is the line, the circle, the square, and the 3 corner things. So most of the work were based in a sort of creative way on these things. And this ball, 3.60 meters in diameter, I thought it was very easy, you know, to take a small ball and to make it a bit bigger, but it didn't work. So I learned so much from these balls. I went to Mathematics Institute, and they couldn't help me to get it a circle. And in the end, one of my close friends that was felting with me, his father was an engineer. So he figured out how I could do it, and he measured it like when the planes go around the Earth. That was the formula he used for it. So, and then the next came, you couldn't do like now, that it is made together, you know, glued, not glued, we had to glue it. And it was only one glue that worked on plastic that time. It was called 1006, and we had to order it from Kristiansand. So, you know, we needed 2 balls, one for the felt inside and one for the real one, that the drawings were on this sort of shitty color, you know, from the glue. And they had each one room before, you know, the middle rooms. So they were close to each other in a way. And you also had, the light wasn't this level. So it was a sort of daylight changing. So actually, these lines in glue was very beautiful, because you saw it on the walls also when you went around. So then came the next problem. The balloons were leaking. And we went for the inside, for the felt ball, you know, to apoteket to have plaster on and everything, and it was still leaking. And then you learned, okay, air is losing That's air. So you had to live with this. So it learned me this about breathing. So I learned so much from this process of working intuitively that I very often do in the visual language. You get an idea, you do it, and you do a lot of mistakes. But I keep to the visual alphabet. And then, in a way, for myself, I start to think, what does it mean? So for me, the text comes after it's finished. And I still keep this way of working because that is the challenge for myself. I don't know what I'm doing. And I think that's probably why I also can be so curious to switch to other materials or work with other things and people. It's so, I learned so much, but still I feel for me the visual language and my visual alphabet, I don't throw away the bad things. I keep it because that I can destroy more and I learn more. So I work in a sort of very simple way, in a way, because I believe in this language. I think that's what I can say.
But I have to ask one more question, which is when your practice often happen outside, so it's like a lot of open air projects, also like intervening in kind of public space, but actually also nature with projects. You mentioned now the felting on top of a hill, and I think we were interested in your practice also for this exhibition for this reason, like as art as a way of like doing something in nature, like the Skärskaras, for example.
Yeah.
But then there's also another level, like the Feldballon in Nationalmuseet. For me, was so clearly readable as a globe, as the Earth ball, basically. A very simple metaphor, and then also the leaking or the fragility becomes very tangible, and this kind of that it's so handmade, felted, adds also to it. It becomes so fragile and scarred. And how far was that part of your consideration, or?
That's the way I am. I am a bit shaky, and I also look upon us as nature. You know, we are also nature. But my deep interest is and has been very much in the felt was dying out. So first time I was writing about felt, it was to learn other people to make shoes. And then it developed by itself. And I think that is also come from the northern part. And after the Namades here, I was selected to be a festival artist in North for the first time. Because at that time it wasn't a lot to manage to show in the North. No galleries, no art museums, stuff like that. So that was, so I went up and I started to take interest in the ocean. Then it was with the whales and the seals that was the big problem, you know, with Greenpeace and Brigitte Bardot and everybody who came up. And then I started to realize how unfair it was in many ways, because the Norwegian states had given the Sami aboriginals to only the people with the reindeer. But it was a lot of those people who didn't have reindeer, and they were forced to be Norwegian along the whole coast up there. Also, the Finnish that was called Kvens, you know, that was a mix of people that lost completely their language, and they were forbidden to hunt in their boats. And I thought it was so unfair. I had been to Japan also with a project, and Japan they were allowed it, and the Greenland was allowed it, and in Norway you couldn't do anything, so it went down everything, because they didn't say hello to our Aboriginal people up there. So that was the beginning of this. And then I was lucky to come to Svalbard with the research people from the university. And that was gave me a lot of fantasy. So it came a lot of these bones. I buy the whole whale, you know, and and I start to use it as building materials, and still it goes with me. So I recycling myself or develop many of my works all the time and get new things out of them. And the last is now the king crabs. I was invited to pick an up of Broen, and then I saw that they are artificial put in our ocean. So we don't know what happened on the bottom. So I made these crabs, you know, big ones in acrylic, and so I take problems like that, but I try to put it into visual language all the time. And the last I was 1 week at Svalbard. They wanted to have me there because I've been there in 1990. And then I discovered, of course, the ice is melting. So that was a theme. But then I also discovered that we don't know anything about what is down in the ocean. And it's a lot going on. And the research has been up all the time. And now they start to find what is in the ocean, and this fantasy is fantastic. It's a lot of species we don't know about, and they have colors, and they can tease each other, and it's mountains down there, and it's everything. So in that way, I build performances and everything, and do it with reflecting materials. So that's me.
Thank you for the insight. Luna, I wanted to invite you to talk a bit more about your grandmother's practice, and especially this social side, because it's something I also don't know so much, or I haven't, there's no documentation, so to speak. But it seems to have been really relevant for the work, and maybe you can talk a bit about her house and...
So we still have her house, and I'm working on turning it into a residency of some sort, because when I work with her, we started working before she died together, collaborating on works, but also how to me, I just really wanted to make her happy. She was having a hard time. And moving from her house to Copenhagen to be closer to us because of her health, but she just missed her apple trees so much, and she had never been lonely in her house, but suddenly she was in the city, and even though we visited, we were not the company she really wanted, and so I realized that to understand the working with her works was also to really understand that house. That actually I can't really take care of the state of the works without taking the house into account, because it's almost an ecosystem. Everything has grown from this house. And so keeping the house alive is how to keep her work alive, actually. And so for 50 years the door was never locked. Even though she was traveling, even when she was almost 80, she drove by herself to Morocco for the winter. She was a really, really inspiring hardcore lady. But everyone knew, friends and also just, colleagues, that if you were traveling through that area, there was a bed for you to sleep in. And she always had, small... skurvogne, a small house on wheels, usually used for working teams on work sites. But she bought these and she had them on her land, and then for her, I have always grown up with like uncles that are not uncles, and actually my grandmother is not my grandmother either. We don't have a direct bloodline but that was never the point. We have always been. The network is through meals and through working together. And I've had this extended family of artists that kind of grew up in her house because she lived quite close to the art academy in Odense, and also she taught at the Jyske Kunstakademi. So she would have a lot of students living with her, and they would a lot of the times help with her creating. And of course, it was a way to share the workload and have assistance. But more than that, she was really trying to pass on knowledge. And when she was teaching at the Art Academy in Jylland, she was teaching the weavers, and a lot of them had children. And she said, please take them. And they would, the babies would lie in the big mountains of yarn. And she considered it a part of her duty as teacher to take care of the children so the students could work. And also it took me a long time, I think I was almost an adult before I realized what her work actually was, because she had such an avant-garde way of doing things. There was no work-life balance situation. Everything is life, everything is work, always. So that means we must cook, and then we must paint, and then we must cook again, and then we do the dishes, and also the way that she worked with materials was always, she was a farmer's daughter, and she said that at her farm they were 12 people living and working, and everything was reused, of course, until the last scrap. What was a dress became a cloth, became food for fire in the end, and the only things that couldn't be recycled could fit into a shoebox. Once a year, her mother would go to the back of the garden and dig down the shoebox, and that was the only thing that couldn't go into this. One shoebox a year for 12 people household. So like Hammerknude, which is in the exhibition, the bigger weave. It also has a beard from a man. Everything comes into the pot. It's a big witch's pot. And the materials, but also the people. Yeah.
But thinking about it, is your take that it's was this an activist approach? Was it like something that was very consciously done? How you described the burying of the shoebox sounds a bit like that, or was it more, something that was more pragmatic part of?
Well, I asked her about. I was like, "Hey, Granny, we're feminists, right? So how do you feel that you have been have you ever felt you have been confined by your gender?" And she was like, "Well, I have to sit down to pee." That was it, And I was waiting for this big structural speech, and of course, and the children, and the housework, and no. She did not, she had a completely different approach, and at the time it really provoked me, because I was like, but that's what you have taught my generation, all you pioneers. And but I also feel that she acknowledges this, the structural violence, and then she moves past it somehow. Like, that is not the story, that is not what's happening here. What's happening here is that we are working. We are not talking about how we cannot work. We are working, and then of course she was also really good at, like, the weavers. They were good at organizing. They went and did sit downs and always stood up for each other and really made a very conscious effort to. Cement the position of their craft within contemporary art. But that was, I guess I guess that's also really important with activism, that the activism itself is never the point. It's a way to get somewhere. And that somewhere was to continue working. Yeah.
But it is interesting that within the kind of lines of gender, or how practices are kind of coded within binary, gendered binaries, reproductive work is often associated or forcefully associated with female gender or women. And yeah, maybe we move over to Marius Heider, because it's interesting that there is some of the kind of problematics of maybe some of the kind of 1960s, 70s politics or activism, that some of these notions are actually quite unquestioned. And maybe like with Marius Heider, who kind of took on big world topics, which is maybe also like within the world of binary coding of working spheres, is very firmly attached to a male kind of logic. And yeah, we're here to dissolve that and fight that. Yeah, Rasmus, so as I said, you wrote your thesis on Marius Heider's work, and it's a complex project. It's really also one of these kind of known, unknown kind of long-term projects. Do you want to talk a bit more about what it actually was, The Last Orc?
Yeah. So yeah, you introduced it a little bit. Maybe I can go back a little bit to see how I came to the Last Orc, because The Last Orc is quite known work of Marius Heider. It's like one of the most iconic works of his practice. Generally, as an artist, he's quite eclectic in his work. He worked with expressionist painting, he worked with kinetic sculpture, he worked with social practices, and what my work were in the thesis was to try to create these kind of genealogies and logics of how he actually worked, and especially The Last Orc, which is a very specific work with very specific politics, with a very specific artistic form. It didn't really make sense to me that why would a bead painter suddenly become an environmental activist? So through the work of reading a lot of documentation and delving into his work, there's very little evidence left, as you also mentioned. It was suddenly clear that there was this kind of environmental interest and ecological understanding in his work that came prior to the work of The Last Orc, and also helped his thinking towards this kind of very direct activist social work of The Last Orc. And this is what we've tried to present in the exhibition also. We have a few works that kind of trace the lineage of his way to create this kind of activist work. Which starts with a work that was first presented in 1967. It's called Lucifer, which was a sculpture of a cow's skeleton and a cow's head that was put together with rebar, and then was spray painted silver, and was presented at the spring exhibition at Kunstens Hus. And with it, he presented a manifest that was apparently called Biocide Necrolog, Biocide Obituary. And this work was like, the Lucifer was like a harbinger of the bad news, the ideas of the pollution of the earth and the threatening of the environmental conditions. And the specific manifest, which is unfortunately lost, it brings very clearly the ideas of the marine biologist Rachel Karlsen. She wrote this book, The Silent Spring, in '62, that highlighted the large environmental problems of poisonous substances in agriculture, specifically insecticides and the insecticide DDT. And a very famous line in the beginning of the book is that we cannot talk about insecticides as something that only affects the insects. It also affects life in general, so she calls them biocides. We need to speak about them as biocides instead. So there was this very direct way of interacting with the pollution of the earth very early in his career, and there were several instances after that that is also presented in the show. The jester wagon, Gøjlervognen, where the Lucifer figure comes back, and they did this kind of outreach artistic project, trying to especially work in these industrial areas of south of Oslo to discuss with workers, but also children and old people's homes, and generally like an audience that weren't really used to work with or be exposed to art, to be inspired by different ideas of what art could be. And one part of that was the environmental discourses, but another part of it was also art to the people, entertaining children with play sculptures and stuff. And because the Gøjlervognen project was this kind of outreach project, they were a touring group of artists, writers, folk singers, actors. It was a collaboration with the Norwegian Writers Association, Writers Center, and the UKS, the Young Artists Society. They had this wagon and they drove around to all these different sites. It kind of built the momentum for what the last org would be. So now I can answer your question very directly. Sorry for this long. It's just quite important for his work because it's never been presented before, and this is what I'm really happy that you have given space to in the exhibition, that we can actually discuss Marius Heidahls environmental work in a much broader sense, and that's so focused. Yeah, so the last org came out of his Marius Heidahls engagement with these environmental discourses and his noticing of the orcs, which is a seabird, were diminishing in the areas of the south of Norway, and he wanted to do something very direct and concrete. So he engaged a documentarist from NRK, Jan Horne, to go with him on this trip around Northern Europe to have these very direct demonstrations at industrial headquarters and industrial sites. And together with a sound person, Lars Mørland, they created an activist group called the Ocean Life Guardians. And they sent letters to various grassroots environmental organizations to participate and take part in these collaborative demonstrations around Germany, Belgium, Holland, and England. So what is very interesting about the work is that there's this really beautiful documentary that Jan Horne did that covered this trip, which was 3 weeks around Europe. The film was shown at NRK in 1971, premiered then, and then there was a re-edited version in 1976, which is quite close to the original, despite that the work also has like this epilogue from Heyerdahl. But the problem with the work in the general like artistic discourses is that it's usually just presented as that trip, the activist works, and that trip of with the last org. Them traveling around to these sites, having demonstrations, talking to the people at the different chemical institutions, confronting them with the politics and the problems of the pollution of their work, and talking to people on the street. And this is, of course, the very large part of the work, very important part of the work, and it's also very interesting and drastic. But there was a big part of the work that wasn't discussed, which was that Marius Heidahls work with the last org didn't really start with the trip, and it didn't really end after the trip. So through my research, I first found that there was a video in a Norwegian culture program called Studio 71, where there's kind of introduction to the work of the last org first. We're very fortunate to show the piece here, shown to the public for the first time ever, and to Norwegian audiences since 71 when it was first finished, where it actually shows him building the caravan together with 2 of his collaborators, and them having a demonstration at the West German Embassy in Oslo. And then afterwards, its presentation at Kunstnernes Hus at the UK's 50-year anniversary show. So it's kind of this prequel to the work, which is really important to have with this history of the work. And then after the tour, which was successful in some ways, successful in not so many ways, when the work came back, he used the org for different reasons and circumstances. And also thinking about the work not necessarily as let's say just the actions or the performative actions of using the org, but seeing the org as a specific sculpture that represents these kind of environmental and pollution questions. So we have a nice vitrine in the exhibition that kind of travels or traces the history of the org after its very drastic and interesting trip. I'm not sure if that answers.
Many of the questions. Maybe actually I open already to questions from the audience, because otherwise we don't have any time at all. If not, I would maybe follow up with one short question before we then close, which is about the relevance of Heidel's practice for today, because that's maybe also a more overall question for some of the older works in the exhibition.
Yeah, I try to be very brief.
Yeah,
sorry. Well, the interesting thing is that Heidel was actually quite relevant in his own time. He was connected to a lot of the large avant-garde groups of Norway at the time, the Skippergata-milieu in Oslo and Gruppe 66 in Bergen, but was also always this kind of outsider. And I think it's because that he was, as you mentioned, he destroyed many of his works, and he unfortunately took his own life tragically in the early age of 41 years old, that his work has just disappeared from history, more or less. So I think the relevance is that the work was extremely relevant at the time. And I think also now, seeing it in this context of the exhibition, it's kind of this pioneering work of how to work with what you can describe as instrumental art, work that actually tries to use direct activism to try to change problematics in the world, confront the institutions that are perpetrating these very large problems. And I think this is luckily the position of Heidel's work, that he's becoming more and more recognized, getting more and more attention again, also because the discourses that he presented back then weren't really recognized as very interested. But now we're in a different political climate that really speaks, where his work really speaks to these kind of issues in a very direct and interesting and beautiful sense. So I think his work will only be more and more relevant. When the National Museum reopened in their new building, there was also the first time that Marius Heidel's work, the video of The Last Orc, was presented at the National Museum. And I think this really speaks to his positioning in Norwegian art history that has been forgotten, unfortunately, but now has a big platform to actually be more developed. And there's still a lot of work to do.
Maybe we close. We hope the same will happen to Annette Holden, and I think it's on a very good way. Thank you also thanks to your efforts. And maybe we close and go down for the last part of the conversations today. We always plan with too little time. Yeah. Thank you everybody for joining so far. We meet in 5 minutes in Gallery 1. Thank you so much, all three. Thank you to Henrik and Vilja and the live team to facilitating everything in a technical sense.